Here comes Hewy, gonna give you the news. Time to watch his animated movie reviews, whether hand-drawn, CGI, puppets or clay. If you've got a good story, you'll be making his day. See you at the movies, cartoon movies. See you at the movies, home run news. See you at the movies, like nobody's business. Hey, see you at the movies, animated movies that is.
Hey everyone, I'm Hewy Toonmore. Welcome to Season 6 of Hewy's Animated Movie Reviews, the show where I review animated films from old to recent, whether they be hand-drawn, stop-motion, or computer-generated. Well, my friends, the new year is upon us. 2012 is far behind us, and now has dawned 2013, which means many more animated films coming out in theaters. And as you can guess, most of them will be in CGI. But today, to start off the new season, I'll be doing something a little different. I'll be taking a look at something that helped develop the history of animated films. And what better way to start than with a dinosaur? It all began with a cartoonist named Winsor McCay. A prolific artist, McCay's pioneering early animated films far outshone the work of his contemporaries, and set a standard followed by Walt Disney and others in later decades. Before going into animation, McCay started out as a comic strip artist. His first major comic strip series was Tales of the Jungle Imps by Felix Fiddle. 43 installments were published from January to November of 1903 in the Cincinnati Enquirer. The strip was based on poems by George Randolph Chester, then a reporter and editor at the Enquirer. The stories concerned jungle creatures and the ways that they adapted to a hostile world, with individual titles such as How the Elephant Got His Trunk and How the Ostrich Got So Tall. Reminds me of those Just So stories by Jungle Book author Rudyard Kipling. His later strips, Little Nemo and Dreams of a Rarebit Fiend, were both set in the dreams of their characters and featured fantasy art that attempted to capture the look and feel of dreams. McCay's cartoons were never overwhelmingly popular, but always had a strong following because of his expressive graphic style. Newspaper pages were physically much larger in that time, and McCay usually had half a page to work with. For fantasy art and comics, his only rival was Lionel Feininger, who went on to have a career in the fine arts after his comic days were over. McCay also created a number of animated short films in which every single frame of each cartoon, with each film requiring thousands of frames, was hand-drawn by McCay and occasionally his assistants. McCay went on vaudeville tours with his films. He presented lectures and did drawings, then he interacted with his animated films, performing such tricks as holding his hand out to pet his animated creations. But in 1914, he would release his greatest work yet, one that would go down in animation history and cement Winsor McCay as one of the founding fathers of the field. Gertie the Dinosaur. Gertie the Dinosaur is classified by film and animation historians as the first cartoon character created especially for film to display a unique, realistic personality. What makes this short great is that it's like those shows at the zoo where this guy would come out and introduce us to this trained animal that can do all these amazing tricks. But since this is animated, he has more freedom to control the animal and do tricks that can be funny. Another thing is the animation. This was made before Walt Disney's time. McCay had to draw each and every scene that's happening, and that must have taken months to complete just one scene. Whew! Talk about time-consuming. One thing I really like about the short is how Gertie moves. Take when she first comes out of the cave, for instance. How she walks mimics the exact foot movements of an elephant, and her neck moves back and forth much like a snake, and her tail looks and moves very much like a crocodile's. A really interesting mixed bag, if you ask me. What also impresses me is that the humor still works. Even almost 100 years after it was made, you can still get a good laugh from some of Gertie's behaviors. For instance, take the scene when Gertie was with Jumbo the Mammoth. She'd pick him up by his tail and throw him like 500 feet across the lake. Then Jumbo would shoot water from his trunk at Gertie for doing that. That was hilarious. Then he gets a rock to the head. Ouch. And unlike more modern hand-drawn animated films where the background is a still painting with animation cells laid over it, everything in Gertie is hand-drawn animation, meaning Windsor McCay had to carefully trace over the mountains, trees, and water every time he drew a new page. Just thinking about it makes my drawing hand hurt. McCay made so many new innovations from this one show. He made this creation called the McKay split system, which would start with Gertie in her key position, then he'd fill in the rest. The technology is just unimaginable and pretty much impossible to use compared to the computers we have today. And as mentioned earlier, Gertie was originally used as a vaudeville act, having Windsor McKay perform in front of the screen, interacting with his own creation. Here, Windsor is Gertie's trainer and friend. This is proven to great effect at the end, where McKay himself would walk behind the screen and make it appear that he walked into the animation with Gertie, having him lift him onto her back, cracking his whip, and bowing to the audience as he and Gertie exit stage right. Now that's what I call a good showman. But there's one thing that has always confused me. You see, there's this one scene in the short where Gertie lays down to rest, and as she scratches her nose, from out of the left side of the screen flies in a four-winged lizard. As it disappears from sight, Gertie is asked about it, and then it is never mentioned again. Ladies and gentlemen, you have just witnessed the world's first ever big-lipped alligator moment.
Big-lipped alligator moment.
I guess it had to begin somewhere. You know, it's kind of funny how Windsor chose a dinosaur to do this, because many people say that the world began to shape up with the dinosaurs, and Gertie would shape up the animation field the same way how dinosaurs shaped up the Earth. It's like, it's not the first, but it's like the beginning of something big. See, I told you dinosaurs were awesome! And what better dinosaur to use than the most popular at the time, the Brontosaurus, or as it's correctly known today, the Apatosaurus. Speaking of dinosaurs, check out Gertie's appetite during the short. I mean, whoa! She must have a cast iron stomach or something. I mean, she eats boulders, she eats a whole tree and stump. Heck, she emptied out an entire lake! Anyway, later on, the short was distributed all over the country, replacing Windsor's live performance with dialogue cards, since this was the silent film era and all. In 1921, they released a sequel called Gertie on Tour, where Gertie visits New York and Washington, D.C. However, it may have only been made for the vaudeville stage, because today there are only fragments and concept sketches that still exist. By looking at what remains of the short, there are some key differences in the animation compared to the 1914 original. One is that Gertie's animation is not as fluid as it was in her first short. Sure, she moves a bit, but sometimes she's as stiff as a board. This is due to the fact that about that time, Windsor was now using animation cells and background paintings instead of the fully animated pages he once used. It's strange that the old technology that he used before seemed to look better than when he did with all the new things. Kinda reminds me of today's age with hand-drawn and computer animation, but that's just me. Since Gertie, Windsor McKay has also worked on many other animated shorts, including the beautifully tragic Sinking of the Lusitania in 1918, an explanation of the sinking of the RMS Lusitania after it was struck by two torpedoes fired from a German submarine in 1915. Plunging the United States into the First World War. In conclusion, Windsor McKay helped make the first true steps in animation with the creation of Gertie, a dinosaur that is something that amazed people at the time, a personality. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to join me for my next review. See the movies, anime movies that is,